Okay, let's dive into this. If you're acquiring a company, there is one major blind spot that can absolutely shatter a deal overnight: hidden cybersecurity risks. Today, we're unpacking exactly what it costs to find those risks before you sign the dotted line. Welcome to this explainer on cybersecurity due diligence costs. $5,000 all the way up to $150,000 or even more. I know that is a massive gap. So in this explainer, I'm going to break down exactly what drives a quote up or down that scale. And more importantly, we're going to explore what you're actually buying at each price point to protect your investment and why taking the absolute cheapest option could literally end up costing you millions in the long run.
So to demystify these opaque costs, here's our quick executive briefing for today. We've got 1. Beyond the financials. 2. The 4 pricing tiers. 3. 5 key cost drivers. 4. The hidden regulatory premium. And 5. Budgeting post-deal fixes.
Let's jump into Section 1, Beyond the Financials. We really need to establish what true cyber due diligence actually looks for beyond a simple financial checklist.
So cyber due diligence is basically the process of assessing a target company's digital risk before an acquisition or merger. We're talking about digging into past breaches, system vulnerabilities, and operational gaps. Think of this process as your ultimate firewall. It protects you against legal disasters, undiscovered data breaches, and hidden governance, risk, and compliance liabilities that, frankly, traditional financial audits will completely miss. I mean, a clean balance sheet means absolutely nothing if the company's servers are already compromised, right?
And you have to understand there's a massive difference between a cheap check-the-box exercise and the real deal. A surface-level scan might just involve reading an existing SOC 2 compliance report or, checking public databases with zero technical validation. But real due diligence, that involves independent control validation, active threat hunting, and sometimes full penetration testing, where experts actually try to ethically hack the systems to find weaknesses. Taking a bargain $2,000 quote usually means you're only getting that surface-level review, which leaves an acquirer heavily exposed to incredibly dangerous legacy risks.
Moving on to Section 2, the 4 pricing tiers. Let's map out exactly what you're getting at these different levels of investment. Now, what's really interesting about this is how heavily the scope scales with the price. Down at the bottom end, a basic risk scan runs about $5,000 to $12,000. It just looks at external exposure with no actual system access. It's essentially just checking if the front door is locked. Stepping up to a standard assessment for $15,000 to $35,000, you start getting full documentation audits and technical analysis. But look at the leap when we move to an enhanced technical review at $40,000 to $80,000. Now auditors are validating complex cloud configurations and running deep endpoint checks. Finally, a full enterprise engagement jumps to $100,000 to $150,000 or more. Why? Because moving from simple external scans to deep compliance mapping and red teaming, which are simulated cyber attacks across the entire corporate network, that exponentially changes the required effort, the expertise needed, and obviously the final price.
Section 3. 5 key cost drivers. So what specific variables are actually sliding your final quote up or down within those foundational tiers?
Well, there are 5 critical multipliers at play here: your industry's complexity, timeline urgency, the depth of technical expertise required, the overall scope of systems being reviewed, and finally, the level of access provided. Each of these dramatically impacts the baseline cost. For instance, granting full white box access to review proprietary source code yields incredibly deep, valuable insights, but it requires stricter non-disclosure agreements, specialized software engineers, and intense security controls, which naturally cost significantly more than a standard black box external scan.
And industry complexity literally changes everything. Highly regulated sectors inherently cost much more to assess. If you're acquiring a financial services firm, expect a massive 40 to 70% cost uplift. Healthcare is right up there too, adding 30 to 60% to your baseline quote. Why is that? Because the burden of proof required by regulators in these fields is intense. Assessors aren't just checking if a system is secure, they're validating complex chains of custody for protected health information or financial data, which is vastly different from auditing a low-complexity sector like education or a standard nonprofit.
And here is a major budget buster for you: urgency. A standard cyber due diligence timeline takes about 2 to 3 weeks to do thoroughly. If you need it done in under 5 days before a sudden deal closure, expect a massive rush premium, adding a 40 to 100% markup to your quote. Rush timelines aggressively compress interview scheduling, cloud access provisioning, and quality control. This forces assessment firms to essentially work overnight and bump your engagement above their other clients. Simply put, if you want it fast and you want it accurate, you're going to pay a steep premium for it.
Section 4, the hidden regulatory premium. Let's shift our focus to how global regulations act as an invisible hand driving up both the scope and final cost of an assessment. 50 million Australian dollars. Just let that sink in. That is the maximum fine under Australia's recently amended Privacy Act for serious data breaches. This perfectly demonstrates the devastating financial reality of ignoring regional compliance during cross-border deals. You aren't just paying to check technical boxes during due diligence, you're paying to make absolutely sure you don't inherit a $50 million liability the exact moment you sign the contract. Depending on where the target company operates, different global watchdogs are waiting, and they drastically affect your quote. In the US, the SEC's strict new cybersecurity disclosure rules for public companies, or financial laws like GLBA, can add a 20 to 40% uplift. Over in Europe, navigating strict privacy laws like GDPR or the new NIS2 Critical Infrastructure Directive demands absolute audit-ready defensibility. That can easily push your assessment costs up by 30 to 60%. Regulators expect meticulous documentation, and gathering that specialized proof requires highly experienced and frankly much more expensive legal and technical assessors.
Section 5, budgeting post-deal fixes. Now let's pivot to the post-deal reality, because that initial assessment quote, it is definitely not the end of your cybersecurity spending. So the crucial point is this. Think of your total cyber budget for an acquisition like a pie. If you're spending 100% of that pie just to find the problems, you're setting yourself up for failure. You should allocate about 80% to the primary due diligence and always keep a 20% contingency, roughly 15 to 25%, to cover the inevitable post-acquisition remediation. No company is perfectly secure. Even the absolute best-run targets are going to have cyber gaps that you will be responsible for fixing immediately.
So what do these post-close fixes actually look like? It could be as simple as enforcing company-wide multi-factor authentication, deploying basic endpoint security, or rolling out staff training. But the heavy hitters? That's migrating a newly acquired company from localized, insecure logins to single sign-on platforms like Okta or Azure AD. Or it might mean reconfiguring complex cloud access permissions and patching massive legacy systems that haven't been updated in years. Rectifying those larger infrastructure issues can easily cost you anywhere from $5,000 to $75,000 right out of the gate, directly impacting your post-deal cash flow.
As we wrap things up today, I really want to share this insightful quote from Alexander Sverdlov of Atlant Security. You're not just buying technical skills, you're buying peace of mind. Deals are made on numbers, but they fall apart on hidden risk. I think this just brilliantly frames the true nature of this expense. Proper cyber diligence is not a simple sunk cost. It's a critical investment in your negotiation leverage, your corporate reputation, and your legal defensibility. So, as we close out, I want you to ask yourself, are you just paying for a PDF report, or are you buying confidence for your next acquisition? Proper cybersecurity due diligence really is your shield against the unknown. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this practical breakdown helps you navigate the true value and the true cost of securing your next big deal.